All right, we can go ahead and get started here on our end. I'm going to pass it over to Raquel to introduce a little bit about the series, and then we'll go ahead and get started with our panelists.
Hi, everybody, and hi to all students, past and current, and also hi, Robin from CCPD. It's so good to get to know you a little better. Welcome to the DIS STS Alumni Network series, where thanks to wonderful alumni, we get the opportunity to organize these events that are a mix of career development and just general personal development for design, innovation, and society majors. To those who may not know DIS, I think everybody in this room does, but Design, Innovation, and Society is a unique design program. It's interdisciplinary in scope with a focus in product and industrial design largely. We really pride ourselves in bringing the social to design worlds and thinking about the consequences of built environments and built products and who they include and exclude in the process. The majority of our students are dual majors, mechanical engineers, civil engineers, biomedical engineers, but also business and management. I'm really grateful to our alumni network for helping us to organize these events. Without them, we literally could not do this. So they're really enthusiastic in their support of the program and they make it work for us. I'm also incredibly grateful to our current DIS alumni liaisons, who are all current students. We have Nampuna Randrinargal, we have Nicholas Rose, we have Fiona Clark, and we have Shane Hammerberg. And they are helping us organize behind the scenes and in front of the scenes. So I'm going to let them introduce themselves, and I'm going to take a step back and just take care of tech for today. So I will leave you in the very capable hands of our current DIS students. Thanks for joining.
Thanks, Raquel. I can start. Hi, my name is Nampuna. I'm a fourth year mechanical engineering and DIS dual.
Oh, hi, my name is Nick Rose. I am a second year mechanical engineering and DIS dual major.
And hi, everybody. My name is Fiona Clark, and I am a senior business management and DIS dual.
I'm Shane Hammerberg. I'm a second year DIS and sustainability studies dual.
Wonderful, thank you. Shane and Nampuna will be moderating the chat from behind the scenes, and then Nick and I will begin with introducing the panelists. So to begin with, I want to thank you all for donating your time today out of your professional work lives to speak with us. And I want to give you guys an opportunity to introduce yourselves, tell us a little bit about your background, what you are, where you came from, and where you currently are. So we can go ahead and begin with Damiel.
Hi, can you hear me all right?
I can.
Awesome. Yeah, I'm Damiel Faxon. I was a mechanical engineer in DIS dual at RPI. It took me 5 years because I did a big co-op right in the middle. But now I'm working for the company that I co-op for. I work for Emerson. It's at an innovation center. So the industry is HVAC and R, so refrigeration, like for supermarkets and stuff like that. And the work I do is innovation work. So right now I'm at a conference in Arizona with some of our aftermarket partners. And so the reason I'm here is we have a cool technology that we've been working through, and we want to put it in front of stakeholders and see if this is something they think they could sell or something their customers want, and stuff like that. So, you know, in DIS, my experience in DIS has helped me a lot in terms of not just being able to do technical and kind of sometimes businessy stuff, but actually directly interacting with stakeholders. So yeah, that's me.
Great, thank you so much. We can move on to Meg.
Hey, my name is Meg Maloney. I am the, I guess, honorary alumni today because I did not go to your all's school, but I went to the University of Dayton. That's how I know Damiel, because I also live in Dayton, Ohio. I was in environmental biology and sustainability, energy and environment, which is very similar, I think, to the program that you all are doing. And I got my master's also in environmental biology. I really have pivoted, and now I am work for the city of Dayton, which is around, we have around 150,000 residents. I'm in the city manager's office, and I do all of our sustainability and energy programming. I do a lot with advancing equity within the city and doing a lot of environmental justice projects around contaminated sites. So I'm excited to speak to you all today about kind of the intersection between all these disciplinaries and how they can work together to advance some really cool projects that we have been doing in the city of Dayton, and talk a little bit about the importance of thinking about the people that you're impacting when you're doing your work. So excited to be here today.
Thank you, Meg. We can move on to Austin.
Hey everyone, I'm Austin. I'm graduated from the PDI program in 2014 with a dual major in business. I'm currently based in Shanghai. I've been based in China for the past 5 years, and I work as a motion designer. I work at a local agency here that does cultural and property clients in China. So we basically work with Chinese property developers and the government to sort of give brand design and visual identities to new real estate projects, like when they redevelop pieces of land in China's cities. Yeah, it's really interesting. I find myself, I came from a background in tech, so this is sort of my first experience agency side. And outside of the tech world. So it's been really interesting. I feel like I've applied more from my PDI background in this job than I have before, which all my jobs previously were kind of in the tech space. But yeah, that's me.
Great, thank you, Austin. And we can move on to Melissa.
Hi, everyone. Just like Meg, I guess I'm honorary alumni. I went to the University of Maryland, and now I am a campus recruiter at MongoDB in New York City. So for those of you who haven't heard of it, we are the world's leading NoSQL database. So you might have heard of a SQL database, which is really something that stores information and data in rows and columns and tables. It's pretty structured. And our database is just the opposite. It's very unstructured. So mostly our users are software engineers and developers. MongoDB can be used to create applications. If you think about storing data, every app on your phone has to have a database, right? Any website you go to has a database storing information somewhere. So MongoDB is one of those databases. And really my perspective for all of you today is going to be from a recruiting perspective. So happy to answer any questions there as the panel goes along. I have hired our product design as well as UX research interns here at MongoDB for the past couple of summers, as well as our computer science internship for software engineers too. So we did actually have an intern from RPI that I hired this summer who's coming back as a new grad for software engineering. So that was really exciting. Not part of this program, but definitely an exciting story to share. So thanks for having me.
Of course, thank you, Ms. Melissa. We can end with Lucas here.
Hey, I'm Lucas, graduated in 2014 with Austin, was DIS and mechanical engineering. After school, went straight into product development startups, lived in New York and Hong Kong, developing consumer goods. And then about 6 years ago, started my own product development firm where we design and develop consumer goods for a bunch of brands, some larger like Fortune 500 brands, and then some smaller where they're just in the seed funding stage. So lots of consumer goods. We spun off 2 businesses from Dorasev, which is the agency, one called Canopy, which is a humidifier business, and the other one called Factored Quality, which is a quality control compliance business.
Awesome, thank you, Lucas. And thank you all for introducing yourselves briefly there. Just to allow everyone in the room, as well as who may be watching this recording, to get to know you guys individually a little bit more. We're hoping you could share a little bit of insight as to why you guys chose the field of design that you have either pursued in your education or and throughout your career. Anything you'd like to share about that, feel free to go out of order or in the same order, whatever you guys would like. All right, we
You
can
can go first.
maybe work our way backwards here. Lucas, do you want us to begin?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I always wanted to develop consumer goods. That was like kind of the dream. My dad and grandfather were both inventors, so it was like always in like very different spaces. My dad was an inventor of medical devices. My grandfather was an inventor of dental devices. So always wanted to like make consumer goods. So this was a really easy path forward for me. And I transferred majors about 1 million times at RPI, but finally ended up where, to be honest, where I started. It's where I came in as a PDI engineer, and that's where I left.
That's awesome. And I saw Meg, you unmuted. Do you want to take it away?
Sure. So I'm originally from the Chicago area. If you're from Chicago, I'm from the suburbs of Chicago, so Chicagoland. And never in like 1 million years did I think I would end up in Dayton, Ohio. Mostly because I had some kind of stereotypes about Ohio in my head. One being that they were just full of people that were, like, I don't know what stereotypes I had, but whatever. I had whatever you know about Ohio. Probably I thought the same thing. And when I went to school here and started studying sustainability, I got really passionate about Rust Belt cities, mostly because they were really, the ones that were leading the way for like the revolution of the Industrial Revolution, but also within the United States, but then also were the economic engines and provided so much. And then, with large manufacturers leaving, especially in Dayton with the loss of, we had General Motors leave, we had Frigidaire leave, we had all these, large corporations, National Casualty Store as well. I might have already said that, but and so it basically left these people behind, these empty factories, and we had a peak population of 260. Now we're down to like 150,000. And why I'm so passionate about it is because I feel like it was designed poorly, like we weren't thinking about the people and putting people first. Second of all, I feel like there's a lot of opportunity here to like grow and reinvent like what the future of Dayton is. And I'm really excited to be working in the local government and being part of that. And third, there's like endless opportunities for sustainability and thinking about how to build a more sustainable and resilient city. I think that when you all talk about kind of like the engineering side of things and building things, I think that's like super exciting, but a lot of times people don't think about the other side of things. Like, where's your factory going and how does it impact the people that live there? And like, are we thinking about the clean air and the emissions from those factories? And so that's the space that I get to be part of. There's a lot of really hard conversations that we have here. But I think, like I said, I think there's like a lot of opportunity. And I also now call myself a Dayton evangelist because I'm just trying to convince people to move here. I'm so glad that Damiel decided to move here because now we're the best of friends, and he can also speak that Dayton is really awesome. But my fun fact before we move on is that Dayton had the most patents per capita before Silicon Valley. And we invented things like the self-starter for the engine, the Cheez-It, the ice cube tray, the search engine, the cash register, those little things that you take when you like take a picture and you can like deposit a check, also was invented here. So a lot of lovely history of innovation in Dayton. And I really think that we're getting back in a really cool space where we're just pushing, building a more sustainable city and building a cooler city for people to live their lives in. So.
That's awesome. I never would have known all those things were created in Dayton.
Right?
Let's hear. How about Melissa? What about you?
Yeah, so my background's kind of different because I came from a business background and now I work in recruiting. But I think something I can talk about, I guess, is like being in the tech industry. And I think also what I've seen with working with the people that I work with within like product design and UX research and engineering. I think one, like MongoDB as a whole is a very, very collaborative culture, which is something that I really, really like. I feel like, especially with the designers I work with, it's very cross-functional, meaning that you're not only working with people within your team and like within the industry that you're focusing on, but you're also working with people across like different types of expertise, whether that be internal to the company or as well as external to the company. And I think having those opportunities is really, really important wherever you may go, and whatever kind of like role you might take. And then for me also, like, I really like early talent recruiting, talking to students just like yourselves, you know, talking to especially seniors when they're thinking about where should I start my career. I think it's really fulfilling because as a recruiter, you don't just look at me as someone to give you a job, you're also looking at me for the mentorship and like some guidance, as well as we plan the entire summer internship program. So we do, I think, a lot of things during the summer with learning and development, as well as letting you meet our executives and our different leaders at the company. So I think all of those things like make me feel really fulfilled because it's not only giving you a job or an experience, but it's like truly, you know, changing your life. We always talk about how we're not saving lives, changing lives, which is very cheesy. But I do think any type of job or experience, leadership opportunity that you have is going to have some kind of impact on you. And internships are a really good way for you to see what you like, but also what you don't like. I feel like people forget about that piece. It's really important to just like be a sponge and take on a lot of opportunities. And then you'll also realize, you know, wait, this doesn't actually interest me. Maybe I want to try something different, or you have a conversation with someone and you learn about something completely new, like this conversation here. So that's kind of some of the advice I could give.
That's awesome. Completely correct about internships and the opportunities they provide. Danielle, do you want to share a little bit about what you study?
Yeah. So I guess the role I'm in, I would call like entrepreneurship. You know, I'm part of a big corporation and we have a small team, and we're told to just make cool stuff, make stuff that is gonna impact the company, that the company needs but doesn't even know it needs. And so why I kind of entered this space and what I really enjoy about it is how kind of interdisciplinary and cross-functional it is. We like a lot of my colleagues are very technical, but the technical doesn't matter if you can't find a business case for it, and if you can't rigorously test that there's customer demand for this, if you can't talk to people and design. The other day I was like designing marketing materials so that we could pretend to sell it to someone to see if they would if there's even any interest in it. And so because I'm kind of in this entrepreneurship space, I get to wear a lot of different hats, sometimes more than I'd like to, but I'm like managing this project and pushing it forward, and sometimes the technical side needs love. Sometimes like I need to figure out how to tighten up the business case and how the dollars will work out. And sometimes I'll learn something from customers and, hey, like the features we built in to this prototype were totally wrong. We need to switch them around. Oh, and that changes the business case. And so it's just like I get to hold this entire model and push it forward until it breaks, and then I get to take it apart and fix it again, and then push it forward until it breaks. And so it's a lot of, I really enjoy it because it's really challenging, and I get to do so many different things and work with so many different people. And so that's why I'm in this space. And I'm in the complete honesty, I'm not especially passionate about the refrigeration industry, but it's one of those industries that is that moves a little bit slower. And so there is a ton of opportunity for entrepreneurship and innovation inside of it. So that's a cool aspect of my work.
That's awesome. And Austin, would you like to close us out here?
Sure. Yeah. So I guess to give some context, when I was graduating, I had done a co-op. So I had co-opted at Hasbro in kind of the same role that Lucas had done. That was sort of like concept acquisition and sort of IP development. And then I had worked after that as an intern on the marketing team at this 3D printer startup called Formlabs. And I basically I knew that I wanted to do something obviously with design, thought that there was probably a place for me in some sort of like marketing team, but I was graduating, I was really not sure, like I wasn't like, oh, I want to be this kind of designer or I want to do this specifically. I was really sort of looking at jobs that were much more generalist. So I ended up going to, I got an offer from IBM. They were like, we have this design studio that we just built, this design and marketing studio that we just built in New York, and we're scaling it up. And so they really didn't have many details on like, you know, what kind of the scope was of the role or even the whole like kind of team, but it sounded like a risk, but also like quite interesting. And the fact that it was in New York City would give me a lot of exposure to different things and just like a really cool living environment. So I went there. I started as like a UX designer, basically on kind of digital marketing products. So things that IBM sellers use to basically manage their digital funnel. And IBM is a huge company, so it moves super slow. So I basically spent a year kind of getting frustrated with like how slow it was moving. But then adjacent to us in our studio, we had this brand team that was filled with like developers, a typeface designer, all these creative directors from Wolf Allens, which is a big agency in New York. And I was like, man, these guys are doing cool work. Like, I don't know how I get on that team, but I want to be on that team. And so then, yeah, after like 6 months of sort of like negotiation and kind of like cozying up to people on that team, I was able to like transfer over, working as sort of a graphic designer focused on like the brand social aspect. So sort of vocalizing whenever IBM would release new brands or do interesting things. And I had a senior designer there that like really sort of onboarded me and trained me in After Effects. So I didn't know it at the time, but it was super useful, sort of diving into the world of motion design and animation for video. And so I basically have used that experience to springboard a career of doing motion design through the lens of branding. So working on marketing creative teams where we have graphic designers and copywriters, and we're pushing branding and marketing content, and being able to bring animation through a graphic design skill set. And yeah, so I was at IBM, and then I was just looking for new roles. I wanted to get to something closer to, I guess, what we study in PDI, which is something closer to product design and something that's closer to consumer goods. And so I got a role at a Chinese smartphone company in Shenzhen. And I remember like talking with Lucas before I took the role. I was like, what's China like? What's the area like? And he was out there with one of our classmates from RPI. And yeah, so I moved over to China, and then I've had a few roles in China since, in Shenzhen and now Shanghai, but always sort of doing brand design through kind of the specialty of motion design, and how do we bring animation to branding and marketing.
That's awesome. Well, thank you all for sharing a little bit more about your personal background and journeys throughout your career paths. As students and of course professionals, you're constantly looking for new jobs and new experiences that really fit your values and what you're looking for to fulfill your life. And that's sort of like what we're going to be discussing today, talking about the resumes and the job search and advice that you guys all have from your interdisciplinary backgrounds and career experiences. So I'm going to hand it off to Nick here, who's going to begin the discussion.
All right. Hello again. Thank you. Learning about your background is very interesting. Hearing about how you guys all come from different spaces and still use these socially conscious techniques and everything that you do. So I guess the first question that we have is, on a resume, how would you convey the different design skills, experiences, and mainly like the social conscientiousness of it all And how would you translate that to the regular standard resume format with like education, work experience, and different skills? And we can start with Melissa, because you're a recruiter, so you probably have come across a couple of resumes.
Oh man, the pressure's on. Um, yeah, for sure. So let me see how to think about this. A couple of tips, making sure that, first of all, just from like a first glance, your resume looks concise. I think using templates online are really helpful. I know a lot of career services also hand out templates as well that you can use and edit. Those are really great. I know a lot of you are more focused on design. So if you can create your own template using like Adobe or something like that, that's also really cool. But I think the main thing is like from at least a resume, we're looking for like, what's the story of this person? And then I feel like if it's a role where there's going to be a portfolio or a website, that's really where we're looking, I think, like in between the lines of like, who really is this person and what have they created? What are they looking for? What opportunities would really entice them? I think a lot of people forget that, for recruiting, it's a two-way street, right? Like you obviously want opportunities and experiences, but we want to make sure that it's the right fit and you're being set up in a role that interests you, where you can explore and be successful. So I think from a resume perspective, definitely making sure that your graduation date is on there, definitely making sure that the classes that you're taking, like relevant coursework, is on there. Especially things that like really interest you. I would say your whole resume should be things that really interest you and you're passionate about. Not just like, oh, I was in this club as a general member. Unless that was a club that you really loved, it might not be as important as, another club that you're really interested in or another opportunity that you've done. So I think a lot of people think of it as like, oh, this is just a sheet of everything I've ever done, but not necessarily, right? You want to make sure that it's the things that really are you're most passionate about, the things that relate and transfer to where you're trying to go and what types of opportunities you're looking for. From a portfolio perspective, at least when it comes to like product design and UX research, we're really looking for your entire design process from beginning to end, thinking about like the concept and the concept mapping and the research all the way through your iterations, user testing, feedback, all the way to a finished like prototype that you might create. And I'm sure other people on the call can speak more to those types of things. But that's really what we're looking for in a portfolio, is making sure that like every single piece of your design process and your thought process or your research is all on there. It's concise, you have pictures, you have text, you have videos, or like if it's an app that you've built, there's some kind of demo that we can see as a recruiter, as well as the team. I share these things with the team members that you'll be working with if you got the role. So that's my best advice I can give.
All right, thank you so much. It was very interesting to hear about the difference between the resume and portfolio standpoint and like what is desired from both. So thank you. Does anyone else have a specific thing that they want to talk about for like the differences between how to convey the skills? Because of course there's like the translation that's important.
The only thing I'll add is from like a local, state, or federal government perspective, and this is like any big corporation too, is like you go through like computer first. So what's important is you need to have the language of the job description in your resume to make it basically through that first stage until someone actually like visibly reads your. So for example, we just had a job application close at the city, and we actually manually requested all the resumes. And then also we took the ones from the computer, and somebody had like actually created a really cool design on their resume, but it like freaked our computer out. And I don't know whose fault that was, but essentially their resume did not make it through. And they were still really qualified, but like, I think that like the computer system is like told like you're supposed to pick up the language in the job description. So if you're not using those exact words, then like it's not going to make it through. So just being like conscious of that like while like the aesthetic of your resume, I think is like impressive, that sometimes really people forget that like every single job you apply for, you are editing your resume, you are changing it to like match the language. And be careful with that, because I feel like some people then exaggerate their skill set, and then like they'll get caught up in interviews when like they're just, really trying too much to match the language. So like there's like an art to like, or there's a balance to that, I guess I should say. But I felt like when I came out of undergrad, most of the jobs that I was applying to within the sustainability field were going through like a computer generated system first. So yeah.
Yeah, it's very important to pay attention to the keywords that come apart with each job that you're going for. And it's the manual versus computer difference is important. So for Damiel, Lucas, and Austin, from a like RPI alum design standpoint, do any of you guys have any specific ways that you've talked about your skills on your portfolios?
Yeah, I think, go.
For I'd say from a, as a physical product designer, not a digital one, what stands out, and I made this mistake, like I was like, I want to make my own website because like that's cool and I want to learn about that, but like you're not being judged on that. Your website, no offense, is probably going to be trash unless you're like that's what you want to focus on. I would look at putting Squarespace, putting together a great Google slide deck with your work. Do not focus on designing something from scratch. You want to just be able to show your work really clearly, and not spend a ton of time on it. On the mechanics of it, you want to be spending time on storytelling. And then for a resume, this is me speaking. I think your resume can only be so good as a designer. Like, it's put in the places you worked when you're coming out of school. You probably don't have that much there, so it's really hard to stand out unless you've had a really great opportunity. But showing your work is going to be the most important thing that makes it stand out. And your work should be easy to get. It should be a link that someone can get. It shouldn't be a file that's so big or a website that has a password. Once that happens, it's like, done. I don't want to deal with this person anymore.
Thank you, Austin.
Yeah, I would echo a lot of what Lucas has said. I think too, even from if you are interested in something that is more kind of traditional design focused in terms of like visual design, I mean, tools like Squarespace are so robust. I think most agencies use something like a Squarespace or a WordPress plugin. So I think accepting that you're not going to build a website and just using a pre-built platform, and then spending that time what I think I see in going through new grad portfolios and resumes all the time is just a lot of work doesn't go very deep. So taking that time and spending it, as Lucas said, on like storytelling, and actually documenting your process in a way that is portfolio presentable, I think is really important. And it's not actually it's not exclusive to new grads. We struggle with this at the agency level all the time, is how do we document our work as we're doing it? Because we always want to show after, how we arrived somewhere and all the research and kind of on the ground work that was involved, not just the final product. So just being conscious of that and taking the time to either do that kind of archival and cataloging of your work while you're doing it, or going back and really doing it in a nice way, I think is important. And yeah, in terms of resume building, the way I've always approached it is you're trying to build like a story about you, or like an image of, what it's like an elevator pitch, right? It's who you are just from like a single document. And yeah, so I think that keeping that in mind can affect what things you decide to keep in there, what things you decide to take out, and even just the way you talk about your experiences. You will have like a list of work experiences maybe, but is there a way to sort of organize everything where it's sort of showing how your different experiences are connected and through your interests? So yeah.
All right.
And yes, LinkedIn. Yeah, LinkedIn
Cool.
is useful.
All right.
Yeah, when I see a resume, the first thing I do is I see if there's a link to LinkedIn. If there's not a link to LinkedIn, I copy and paste the name into Google and see if there's a LinkedIn. And part of that is it's just actually easier to see all the different roles someone has had, and it's just visually easier to understand someone's history. Yeah, and so I really like the storytelling piece. If you some way you can really upgrade your resume is if you just spend an hour and put a pair of glasses on that is like, I don't know anything about this person, and then just look at the resume and be like, okay, what am I learning? Like, what am I learning about this person? And you might see some glaring holes, like, hey, I love working on teams, and that doesn't come through here. How can in those descriptions you bolster those things and all that? And then another thing is, I think, so for the roles that I usually hire for, we don't ask for portfolios. This is making me think maybe we should, because portfolios are awesome. But one thing that I think is a little underrated is cover letters. And what I would say is, if you're writing a cover letter just to write a cover letter, don't do it. If you write a cover letter because you're passionate about the role, and in writing a cover letter, you'll have to do research. You'll have to learn about the specifics of the company. You'll have to, be like, pull out from the job description, and actually just going through that process of writing the cover letter will prepare you for the interview. And so that you get in the interview, and if they ask you, why are you interested in working for this company or working for or doing this type of role, suddenly you just have that extra hour or two of experience just living in that space, and they'll be really helpful.
All right. Thank you so much for all the lovely feedback on different forms of resumes, portfolios, cover letters. It's very important, and LinkedIn also is extremely important. So with explaining the various things that you do in design, or just dual majors in general, to recruiters, it often comes across as unfocused. You're going in all these different directions. What do you really want to do? So how would you go about explaining your interest in multiple fields and seeming focused and concentrated to people who may see you as not? And if 3 volunteers would like to select themselves going forward.
I mean, I would just sit.
Go for it.
I would just say that the modern team, especially for designers, is not unfocused, but it is collaborative and interdisciplinary. I mean, even from something like I brand design is typically a traditionally very kind of you have graphic designers, but we are expected to do so many different types of work, like videography, illustration, type design, even handcrafted illustration or kind of research work. So I don't think I have yet to see or work on a modern design team that isn't collaborating with business people, marketing people, engineers, product designers. So I think that when we talk about the program, the way I always talk about it is that it's giving you that experience earlier at the university level. And it's super valuable because you're able to focus your study and your in-university work experience on kind of developing those skills and getting that experience.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. I think another thing is you can show focus and skill and expertise in the things above and below it. Above and below, I'm a designer and an engineer. The things below it are, I'm detail oriented. I'm really good at communicating. I work on those things are important for whatever role, and they're especially important for the types of roles where you're working with interdisciplinary teams and stuff. And you can go above that. You can show, hey, I understand the importance of the project, not just my role in the project. So if you can, I'm not going to get into too much detail on how to do that because it's hard, but those are both ways that you can show that you're like focused and skilled and have expertise while still like having it open that, hey, I'm interested in different disciplines. Yeah.
And I was gonna say, going off that too, like and the earlier idea of like telling a story, I think that something that I've seen very successful is, and again, I didn't go to school with you all, so I don't know like the route to best do this, but like we had like honors theses or like capstone projects. And in that, like I, being in the sustainability field, like it is a very interdisciplinary field, but I did like a resilience assessment. And basically, when I show the deliverable of that, or when I talk about it on my resume, it includes like a bunch of different skill sets that I have from all of the backgrounds that I'm in. So for example, like I learned how to code. I code in R. So I talked about like the coding I had to do in R. Like I talked about the GIS analysis that I did. I talked about the community surveys that I did. And then I also had this product. So, and I always do this in interviews regardless. I think it's like, I don't know. The people on the panel can tell me if this is like something that's maybe not a good idea, but I always bring doesn't matter, like whatever interview I'm going to, I always bring like deliverables in person of the work that I've done. So like, even if they don't ask for it, I still show up with like my resilience assessment that I've committed. Like I have like, I created like this like educational program for youth. So I'll bring like the, like worksheet pages that we did in that. And that way, like when I'm telling the story on my resume, also in person, I can talk about the interdisciplinary and how all those pieces connected, and then have the visual to also show as well. So if you can highlight, it's hard to do that, to highlight that on a resume, but I think like on my resume, like it says like my name and then education. And then like my first thing is an experience is usually like, well, now it's my job that I'm currently doing, but my first line item is like the project that I think highlights my skill set the best. And like, and shows those like different backgrounds, and you can put those like bullet points of like, and then I did this as part of that job. So that's a really good way to show it. And I think tie it all in. And then I think now that you're since you all are still in school, try and do as like much. I audited a bunch of classes when I was a student as well that helped me. So I do a lot of engineering now. I am not an engineer. Like I'm like a wannabe engineer is what I say. And so like, I audited like 6 engineering classes, like in undergrad and in grad school, to help me kind of get that background. I'm never going to know thermodynamics. I did not take that class, but I took like an energy systems class and a building energy efficiency class. And so auditing too kind of helps build your skill set too of things that you can get outside of like the majors that you're in as well.
All right. Thank you again. It is very important to have all of the vast backgrounds and different skills, and communicating that effectively is also important.
Now we're going to move on to a little bit more into the job search aspect of, building a student's career. So once they have their resume and portfolio prep, they continue on with the job search. And we're wondering, what tools and tactics did you guys use for your job searching, other than scouring the internet, that might be more relevant to those pursuing a creative career?
We've hired a bunch of people who have like DM'd us on Instagram. Like, I have to say, like,
awesome.
and this is much more in the designer community, but like there are a bunch of designer hashtags and like competitions. The one in industrial design is like Render Weekly, and like it doesn't totally tie in, but I would imagine there's one in graphic design, like where people are just posting and tagging it, and like we've looked for people just through that tag and just like slid into their DMs and be like, hey, if you want a job, just send us an email.
Yeah, I'll say I'm a LinkedIn girly, so I post a lot on LinkedIn, and that's how I connected with people and was able to kind of like network that way. This is like really pessimistic, but I think it's true. There's like a lot of like almost like nepotism, but like in terms of like, oh, you co-opt at this place, then you're probably going to get hired. So in the sustainability field, for me, like if you are, sustainability is like jack of all trades, master of none. So you need to know a lot about a lot of little things. And then all like the cities or corporations, like whatever part of sustainability you're in, they all like copy one another. And so what was frustrating to me is to get in the field, it was really hard because everyone was like, if you didn't have like an internship, like most of the times people would like hire that intern up. So like how I got my job at the city of Dayton is like, I figured out, I'm like, dang, like in the sustainability, people only hire interns. And so like part of the reason I went to grad school was because I found out that the city sustainability office was like hiring interns in sustainability, and they were like, had to be in grad school. And so I was like, sweet, that's what I'm going to do. I also have my grad school paid for, which was very nice. But so like that, I will say that like, I know like a lot of like co-ops will do that too. So if you co-op somewhere, they'll usually hire you on. I don't think that's necessarily like a bad model. Like now is like someone that's like my interns like are great. And that's why like, I'm like, yes, I would love to hire them. So I don't think it's a terrible model, but I do think that like, it's kind of annoying if you want to get somewhere, you really have to either like intern, fellow. AmeriCorps is like a great one too, if you kind of just need to like get into a space or try something out. But then, yeah, if you want people to notice you, I feel like the social medias is great. I stalk people on like LinkedIn all the time. Twitter is also very popular, I feel like, in the environmental field, if you have like an environmental Twitter. So anyways, those are some good ways to do it.
We love the unconventional. Does anyone else have any unique sort of tips to how to find a job?
Yeah, I one strategy I still use is I keep a running list of brands that I would like to work at, which I sort of self-edit and kind of build from. But it sort of allows me to just check on, like, just be aware of kind of their careers page or like how their kind of outward facing HR works. And it's actually how I got my role that took me from New York to China. The smartphone brand I worked for was like on this list. And so one strategy I use too is like a lot of these big tech corporate job postings are written with like the driest, like worst, like it's not a human writing the language, basically. It's like a list of like job functions. But so to me, those were the ones where they just needed to file like a job posting on LinkedIn. But I remember for this smartphone company, it was written like a piece of marketing. And I was like, oh, there's definitely a copywriter behind that. And so I think taking notice of how job postings are written, and if you can tell, at least for a designer, if you want to be on like a small creative team, if you can tell that someone's sitting on the other side of it, writing this job posting, there's a good chance that the team is smaller, they might have more control over their hiring. And that, at least for me, that was the case. It was, I was unsure, and then I applied, and then their team got in touch and they're like, oh yeah, we bring people over from the US all the time, like we're all foreigners, blah, blah, blah. So I think that's also a good strategy to kind of like filter out some of the job postings that are just there for like SEO or because they have to file it on LinkedIn or something.
Thank you. And before we move on to a bit of like a career reflection path, for those who, I know you guys talked about, it's important to highlight internships and experiences you've had, but for those that don't necessarily have internships when they're going into their graduation year, is there anything that you guys would recommend in terms of highlighting, your experiences without having those professional experiences?
I can start.
Just go for it.
Yeah, sorry. So from a recruiting perspective, like we don't require you to actually have an internship. So I wouldn't ever feel discouraged if you're applying to something and don't have previous experience. I think my biggest thing I can say, projects are extremely important, whether that's a project you've done for a class, an extracurricular, something in your personal time. For those who are like very techie, like a hackathon, or I know someone earlier was talking about some like design challenges. Those things are really important. Anything you do in your personal time, right? Maybe you're like, oh my gosh, I don't have an internship or a job. Okay, start doing some personal projects and start really thinking about what you've done in your classes that you feel like you can represent on your resume and feel like you're really passionate about. Having those relevant coursework, I think, is really important too, just so like whoever's reading your resume can see what types of things you have done. Other than that, if you're someone who has done community service or like other community types of leadership, yeah, maybe it's not going to show your design skills, but it is going to show that, you're collaborative, you have taken on a role like outside of it, just really puts you, I think, apart from other students. And so those things are definitely important as well. Or even anything in athletics, those things can be great too. Like if I see someone was like captain of their volleyball team, it's like, okay, I see that you have leadership, you know how to work with others. There's certain things that athletes, certain traits that like a captain of an athletic team might have. So those things are really important because I think whatever role or whatever path you go, always going to be looking for collaborative people, always going to be looking for someone who has like that initiative and that drive, and maybe someone who wants to be a leader in the future or has some leadership abilities. And those are really big things.
Yeah, I would definitely echo some of that. And I think it was something that we've talked about a little bit, the storytelling aspect. That's as basic as, if you have a project that you finished in school, and if you spend, an extra month working on that project and making it nicer and like upgrading it and just so that it really shines, like that will really pay off. When your project ends at school, that doesn't mean you don't have to show that version of it. You should take it to the next level. And then I think especially, I know the first job out of school is like seems really, really important, but what the really important thing is, like your fifth year out of school, what are you doing? Because that's probably what you'll be doing for a much longer period of time. So what I recommend, especially if you don't have internships and stuff like that, apply to a bunch of stuff. Like Austin was saying, if you see a bunch of computer generated stuff, give them your basic resume. They like don't put too much time into it. If you see like a really cool job, put more time into that. If you can look at a job and say, hey, yeah, I want that, scale 1 to 10, I want it, like it looks interesting, maybe a 3. Just send the resume out. Don't worry about like making it all nice, like for that particular job. But once you get to that job that's like getting higher and higher on your list, those are the ones that you want to really dive deep on. But I would just like, I got my job because I was just clicking around on LinkedIn and sending my resumes in randomly, happened to be during the summer, and I didn't know that it would be as great as it is, and it's really great. So, it's like, it's a balance of taking the time where it needs it and also just putting yourself out there. So.
Yeah, I'd also think about looking at companies that are large enough to onboard junior team members. When you're looking at smaller companies, they're oftentimes constrained by every single head count at this company has to be performing at a relatively high level, and there's not a lot of bandwidth to train all the time. Larger companies oftentimes have training programs and come in are used to bringing in people who don't have a lot of experience or have pathways for that, where they may be more open to bringing in someone who doesn't have work experience and are okay to do that training on the job.
All right. Thank you. For the kind of final question before we enter our Q&A, we would like to ask you all, reflecting on your career so far, how has like interdisciplinary experiences and your education impacted the current career that you have? And
impacted.
Yeah, and one kind of add on to maybe help spur some of those thoughts. When choosing what you do now, or maybe your first job out of college, did you align it with your values, and did you like hold true to that? That's kind of what's important with like DIS. It's involving the whole like societal aspect and being cautious of not just the basics.
I can start. I came out of college like super angsty, mostly just because I was so passionate about the environment and felt like there was a lot of people in positions of power that weren't taking climate seriously. and that like the future of our generation was going to be the one that has to deal with it. And it was very frustrating to me. And so I thought that I never thought I'd go like work for a local government. Like I always thought that I would go more for like an education route, because I was like, the key to people understanding this is just if they're educated. But I think what I learned is that like I felt so much, especially like being in school during like the 2016 election, like felt like there was like a lot of like hopelessness. And what I love about working for a local government, and I think why I'm so passionate about it, is like local government can actually do a whole lot. Like we can make really big strides and can actually control like a decent, or control is a bad word, but actually like influence a decent amount of like the people living in a certain area. So I did not expect to like kind of go this route, but I think my experience was really good because I really loved working in the community. I did a lot of community engagement beforehand, like working with neighborhoods and neighborhood presidents to like I helped with create like a nature play at a local park, and I helped do some like rooftop solar installations. And so I think that like what's cool about your career as it unfolds is I don't think anyone can predict exactly what they're going to do when they're graduating. But like, I think it's kind of fun to see like the things, like if you really just follow what you're passionate about and like find opportunities where you can show your passion, I think that that's really great. And then going to the values question, like, I think that I love my job so much and get so much out of my job because like it really aligns with my values. I think like, I try to have a good work-life balance because I think that's very important. But I think that the times when I do have to do things after work or like put in extra hours, it's because it aligns so much with like the things I want to do. And I feel like I'm actually like making a better impact on my community. And that's like a very, like I feel like you get a lot out of that if you go into a career like that. So, I feel very lucky to be in my job that I'm in because I think it is kind of a perfect fit for things that I like to do.
Yeah, and because of Meg, my among many other things, my electricity bill is a lot smaller than it could have been. So thanks, Meg.
You're welcome. Yes.
And that's kind of relates to one thing that I wanted to have an impact. I wanted to, and mostly I wanted to make stuff. And so that was like really important. Like I need to be somehow connected to stuff actually happening. I can't be like, I didn't want to be in marketing or something where I'm just like selling things. Like I wanted a role where like I was in part of the process of actually kind of, at least maybe not actually putting stuff together, but deciding how it should be put together and being on the early end, being able to make those decisions. And I just enjoy that type of work. You know, I feel like my brain is conducive to that type of work and, you know, thinking outside of the box and that kind of thing. In terms of the values questions, I had kind of just like a whole, you know, going to RPI and being an engineer at RPI, I had a whole lot of things I didn't want to do. You know, I didn't want to work for a defense contractor, didn't want to work for the Department of Defense, didn't want to work for an oil and gas company, you know, among some other things. And yet, yes, I've aligned with that. You know, some of my company does a little bit of oil and gas, and I'm not happy about it. But we're splitting off. And also, I didn't even know about HVACR. Like, I wouldn't have chose it on a list, but I felt good knowing that I was like, you know, I wasn't contributing to some of those things that are not in my values.
So just what was I going to say to that point? I think what I always and continue to appreciate of the PDI program is that from a design education level, it gets you comfortable with not kind of confining yourself to one thing. You know, my colleagues are all graduates of very traditional kind of art school programs. And we have this problem where we're a tiny team and sometimes we need people to kind of do things that are outside of their training. So whether it's like doing a video shoot or just doing something that requires a bit of like on the job education. And I find my colleagues a lot of time are like paralyzed by it. They're like, it's like not within my like graphic design skill set. So they get like really worried about it. And I find that the people I've worked with and know from the PDI program are just less inhibited by that, more willing to sort of jump into things that are outside of what your typical work or skill set is. And I really appreciate that, because it has led me personally to a lot of cool work experiences. So like when I was at the OnePlus, the smartphone brand, I'd been doing a lot of photography and sort of copywriting, and so was able to actually work on like a magazine that we put together and go shoot. We did like a collaboration with McLaren. So I got to be with the McLaren team at the F1 Grand Prix for like a whole week in their pit, just like shooting photos and talking to people. And so those are kind of like career experiences that you don't get just by kind of like going to a job and kind of filling your base kind of like functionality as a team member. So I really appreciate that from the program. It's something that I always kind of think about and come back to.
I can chime in. So I talked about how I was a business major. I was a marketing major. Now I'm in recruiting. If you asked me when I was in college, I would never have said that I was going to go this path. So I think my biggest thing that I would say is like, definitely just like keep your mind really open, especially when you are more junior in your career, because you never know what opportunity might come your way. There's also just like so many different opportunities out there that you might not even know what exists yet, you know? And so the other thing I would say is like, keep networking, like keep coming to events like these. You know, something that I did, I didn't share earlier, but like during my senior year, I reached out to friends and family over email and was like, hey, I'm looking for a job. Like, here's what I'm interested in. Does anybody have any connections? And I did like 15 to 20 just informational interviews, meaning it was not for a job. It was truly just learning about what these people, like my family's random connections. I had no idea who these people were, but like learning about what they did, what they liked about their role, how they got to their role, like their career journey. And I think hearing all of those types of conversations also helped me to realize what I really like. So I think at the core, it's like, okay, yeah, this is my major, or these are my multiple majors in the program I'm doing in school. But it's like, what do you actually like about that? Like for me, marketing was very relationship and people based. And so that is why I transitioned into recruiting. It's also just kind of like where my job search fell, but I've never really looked back. Like people are like, well, would you go back and get a master's and transition back to marketing? I'm like, no, because what I love is working with people, giving people opportunities, like, you know, helping them to see a new path that they might not have seen before. And so I think those are my two big like tips, is definitely keep yourself really open. And then definitely like keep expanding your network. I know we talked a lot about LinkedIn, but I've also been in a sourcing role, which are basically recruiters that reach out to you, like cold reach out to you based on like skills and keywords from your LinkedIn. I see some laughs, but it's really a job. And so you never know at any point. I do this for students too, right? Like where skills on your LinkedIn profile are going to match a role that someone has, a company you've never heard of, a role you've never heard of. So definitely like keeping up your LinkedIn profile, connecting with people, seeing people in your network is really, really helpful.
See, we've got a guest panelist here, two of them here. Lucas, did you want to share with us the last question, and then we can move into our QA?
Sorry, what was the last question that we were
on? No problem. It was reflecting on like what you do your career so far. How has interdisciplinary studies and like experiences helped you pick what you do, and how have your values also affected that?
Yeah, I think from an interdisciplinary side, like I do a lot of different things, and I've like played a lot of different roles in the businesses that I've been able to be a part of and start. I think something that I always kind of come to and think about, especially as an engineer, is our degree is in mechanical engineering, oftentimes, right? Your job is not mechanical engineer. It's very rare that you get a job where your title is mechanical engineer. It's project engineer, it's design engineer, it's X engineer. It's having an engineering degree is like being a doctor. Like you have yet to specialize yet, and you're very early in your career, and you have a lot of time to start to specialize and have different roles and have different positions. And once you get in the field, you realize like no one does what they do in school really, but everyone pulls on the expertise that they had the opportunity to gain in school. So I would just think through that and take what you're learning in school now that you really want to explore, right? And it's probably, if you're lucky, it's 10% of what you're doing in school, and 90% of it is like you're just cheating your way through school to get there. But that 10% that you love, like do every bit of it you can. Do it on the weekends, you know, get as much exposure as you can, that 10%, and add it to, and put that in your portfolio, get really, really good at it, and like effectively into a point where you could lie to someone and say that you spent 90% of your education doing that.
Thank you all for your advice here today. We're going to open it up to the students in the classroom as well as anyone online for a quick Q&A session. We got about 20 minutes left. So if anyone online does have a question, just raise your hand and we can find you if you'd like to speak, or you can put it in the chat. And then I will have Puna and Shane help us out in the classroom. And just go ahead and introduce yourself, and then you can say your question. There's a camera right here.
So my name's Lila. I'm a biomedical DIS dual. This is not super design related, but I know a few of you have jobs overseas, and I was wondering how you like search for jobs in different places, because I feel like it's been hard for me to find anything other than in the US.
Yeah, I can definitely talk to that. So just doing a little bit of research and finding kind of what the expat hubs for what your interest area is. Like when I first moved to China, Shenzhen had a ton of tech-related expats working there, engineering, kind of design from a tech perspective. Whereas up here in Shanghai, it's more traditional like graphic design, and big sort of corporates. So people involved with like marketing and business development, it's a bit more like traditional corporate up in Shanghai. But I think there are definitely like pockets everywhere. Like Singapore and Dubai have like huge kind of like financial sectors. I don't think that's going to be a sector that a lot of people go into from this program, but kind of understanding where these groups of people congregate and exist and work outside of the US, I think is important, as well as identifying countries that make it easy to get a job there. Like China, it's pretty easy for a college educated American to come over here and work, especially if you have an advanced skill set like engineering and design. So identifying countries that make it easy and have a process is definitely a good first step.
Yeah, and I'd add, there are countries that allow you to get visas super easily, and can be very inexpensive to get a working tourist visa or something like that, where you can get ahead and it may cost you a couple $100 to get a working tourist visa that allows you to work in that country. China is not the easiest to do that.
Yeah, China is not that.
But lots of places in Europe, a lot of the Commonwealth countries, Singapore does allow that. And that's a really good step to say that like, hey, I have taken the time, I can work, and I am willing to get my ass on a plane and go do that. But it is really hard for your first role to be, I'm straight out of school and I want to work in this country and I'm not there. So it's not easy. Study abroad if you can, and that is a good way to get your first step, because you'll build relationships with professors, other students that are going to work there, and they can vouch for you at those companies. Study abroad in Singapore.
I'm planning on doing a grad degree overseas somewhere, so that should be helpful, hopefully.
Yeah.
Also, big companies that have, so like when I was at IBM, it's not something I took advantage of, but they have a pretty robust system for taking like new grads that have about like 1 to 3 years experience at the company and sending them overseas for like a year to like 3-year stints. So a bunch of my friends that I started with at IBM have gone to like London and Malaysia and different places like that. So yeah, big companies can also kind of support that. Yeah.
Thank you.
Move abroad. I've loved it. I support anyone that wants to go live outside of the country. It's been a very valuable experience for me.
Any other students in the classroom? Got someone coming up here.
Question on behalf of Nipuna, she has to go. Let's see. Interviews are both about you and the company promoting themselves. What types of questions should we ask during interviews to see if we align with the company's culture or the hiring manager's leadership style?
I can start. I think this is really good. I feel like I get a lot of questions on my phone screens. What's the culture like? Or what do you like most about the culture? But I think if you're someone who's really trying to look at the values, I think asking something that's even deeper, right? So if like professional development and mentorship is important to you, asking a more specific question like, what personal and professional growth have you received since starting at this company? So that's going to probably give you a pretty good indicator from that interviewer. I think also a lot of companies have their values listed on their website. Like I know we have 6 core values at MongoDB. So I think you could also say like, hey, like embrace the power of differences was a value that really resonated with me. How do you feel like you see that in the company? And so just taking a pause there first, as a recruiter, I'm going to be so impressed that you knew one of our values. And 2, like very impressed that you're even wanting to know more about it. And then 3, you're going to get your answer of like, hey, this is something that resonates with me, but like, how is this actually shown? I think also a lot of companies talk about diversity and inclusion and equity, but then when you actually ask about it, they don't really have an answer of what actions they're taking, what they're doing, how you'll feel like you can really like bring your authentic self to the company when you're working there. So I feel like asking those questions, like if that's something important to you, then asking those more deeper questions, if that makes sense, are really important. I hope that gives some examples.
The only thing I'd add too is like, don't be afraid to ask certain questions too, because if they get turned off by you asking that question, that means they're not the right fit. And I think that was like the best advice that someone had given me. Like in my interview, I asked like what was a work-life balance, or for one of an interview for I didn't accept, like I asked what the work-life balance was. And they were like, oh, most people work overtime. And then I was like, oh, are we compensated for overtime? And they were like, no, but it's part of our like, it's just like part of the grit that we have working here. And then I was like, I'm absolutely not going to work there if I'm not getting compensated for like doing overtime. And so don't be afraid to ask those questions because you're interviewing them as much as they're interviewing you.
One practical tip too, if your interview is in person and you have you have some say in when you schedule it, scheduling it near lunchtime is pretty valuable because you can see in the office like how people are sort of behaving. If everyone's at their desk kind of eating and like zoned into their computer, it says something versus whether people are like actually meeting up for lunch and kind of taking an actual break. It's just something I've used, especially in China, is helpful to see.
That's a good one. Never heard that trick. Interesting. Is there any other questions in the classroom? Yep. All right.
Hi. So it was mentioned briefly that like having sort of like a foot through the door for a company kind of helps you like get jobs with them like co-ops and internships and things like that. As a student, what are like some other ways that you, in addition to like internships and co-ops, that can kind of like familiarize you with a company? Any suggestions on things you can do for that?
Could you say that last bit again, or just get closer to the mic?
Yeah.
So like in addition to internships and co-ops, what are other ways you can kind of familiarize yourself with a company and kind of get your foot through the door?
You guys hear that all right?
Yeah. Do you know, I just learned this recently and I didn't know that there was a difference. So there's like mentorship and then there's like sponsorship. And the difference is like mentoring is like helping you as like a person in your professional and personal, where sponsorship is like helping you professionally get to like your next career step. So what's fascinating to me is if, if you don't have an internship or co-op, like that's fine too. If you have like a really good advocate in the field, it could be like a family friend, it could be like a friend, whatever, that can like advocate for you into like a company that you want to work for. Like that's really huge. And like you can ask people like, and I didn't experience this until this year, like you can ask people to sponsor you, and like they're not mentoring you, they're basically just giving you career advice to help you get to like that next level. The other thing too is like a student is like, if you do a project, again, like a capstone thesis, something where you're interacting with a company that you might be interested to hire for, they get to see your skill sets in kind of another way, like through your like, and even if you're not like directly working with them, like showing them your portfolio or something. The thing that I would say doesn't really work very much, that I tried a lot as a student, but now as a working professional, I'm like, yeah, it's kind of like, is like, it is good to network, and like where I'm always down to like grab coffee with people and talk with them. Then it's always like hard, because then a lot of times we'll be like, oh, do you have a job? But I'm probably still going to treat you, if we just get like one coffee once, I'm probably going to tell you how you can apply for a job, but it doesn't really change much. So that's why I think like you kind of need to have some sort of like like you need to kind of bring something else to the table. Though asking for coffee with someone that works in the company, I still like do recommend that, but I will say it's like hard to expect that like something can always come out of that.
Yeah, and I'd add to that, like you can DM them on whatever channel and they will probably say like, sure, I'll hop on a call with you, or I'll buy you coffee. But like, that's not going to turn into a job immediately. You may have to meet, like if you guys hit it off, it's talking to them every 6 months for years until the timing matches, and like you've built the skill set that they need to hire someone with your skill set at that exact time. Or what probably will happen is they know someone who's hiring for the position that you want, maybe not even in that company.
I want to add to like conferences, or kind of earlier I was mentioning like hackathons, or like different, I think like larger things you can get involved with. And just like community groups, those things, a lot of companies will go to those groups, they'll sponsor, you'll get to maybe like even interview sometimes at those types of things. And so I feel like those are really helpful. Like, for example, like Grace Hopper is like a conference focused on women in technology and STEM. And I know like a lot of companies go to that. Afrotech is a conference in Austin next week, where, it's focused on Black and African American people within the workspace as well as students. So I feel like getting involved in those types of things at different levels can be really helpful. And like, obviously some of these conferences cost money, but there's also ways you can get involved in different community groups for free, just joining. And sometimes they send out newsletters, or they have different company meetups, just like this one, where you do get to talk to professionals and like network with them. And that kind of stuff does go a long way.
Great. Thank you, guys. Thank you. And we will close out with one last question from Alex Leclerc. He is online, and then we will close up the program. So Alex's question is, we've talked a lot about storytelling and documentation for portfolios. If I'm looking for more of an engineering product design role, which is more important, the technicalness of the product or the story I tell about it? And he referenced that he has a project that he turned into a company, but it's not very technical.
I think, especially early on in your career, like, this is bad to say, but generally your ideas are not great and no one cares about your ideas. A lot of the companies that you are likely applying to want to leverage your skills, that they can say a more senior person has a what they feel is a great idea, and they want to use your skills to deploy that idea. And so you coming in, what's really important is to show, one, that you have the skills to deliver on their idea, and that you can tell that story and it can be very clear. I heard a saying recently that it's better to be clear than clever. Like, that's really, really important, especially from a technical background, because it's really hard to make technical stuff clear and concise.
Thanks, Lucas. Does anyone else have anything to add to that? All right. Well, thank you. We do have just a few minutes left here, so I want to say thank you to all our panelists who have joined us. All your advice is so much appreciated. And for anyone that's watching online, this is recorded, so you can always refer back to it to hear the wonderful responses. And with that, we're going to close with a few announcements from student groups and student resources on campus that are more relevant to DIS students. The panelists, you are welcome to listen in and hear what's going on campus, but if you have to go, we understand, and we want to say thanks for being here.
Thank you so much.
Cool.
Thanks everyone.